Thank you so much. Mr. Shaw, the other brilliant dignitaries of the dais, my colleagues, a number of my friends from the University of Delhi and JU, sit across. It's a great privilege to be amidst you. Thanks to Mr. Goga and his team for giving me this opportunity. In fact, both Indian diaspora as well as human rights, I don't belong to any of the disciplines, but I'm very sure that what I'll be talking about will fit into this system of what they are talking about, human rights, concerns of Indian diaspora. Mr. Sharma has spoke very nicely in the morning, introduced the subject. A number of my other speakers also spoke so brilliantly on that. But I will be a little different, little unorthodox, and away from the mainstream. As a background, I firmly believe that the time has come to institutionalize the role of Indian diaspora as development partners. And this cannot be done until unless we look into ourselves, we look into our own socio-economic political problems which are being confronted by all of us. By topic, globalizing India, Indian diaspora as development partners, will have 5 different parts. I'll be talking about the context, I'll be talking about the main dynamics of globalization which generally go unnoticed, unattended, unaddressed in a number of ways. And then it gives a critical evaluation and also brings out the Indian diaspora, its main highlights, and also the limitations. Specifically, I'm sure that some of the points will be relevant for the policymakers. The context is that India, with a 7-8% rate of growth and being projected as the 3rd largest country in the world in 2050, will give us a feeling as if we are really globalizing and would be a great country. Yes, of course. And the policies of liberalization, privatization and globalization has further shown us, given us a strength, and we have shown to the world that we have come up. This process which we followed has also created and brought a number of opportunities as well as concerns. This makes us to think that what are the contradictions in the rate of growth which we have achieved so far? What is the kind of process of economic, socio-economic, political development, and what are the concerns which are important for the country as a whole to be addressed today, particularly if we are thinking in terms of involving Indian diaspora. Let's not forget the rate of growth which we have achieved, 7-8%, is much above, in fact, double of what we call the rate of growth known as Hindu rate of growth, 3 to 4%, long back. Around 2%, which we have about 60 years, starting from 1900 onwards to 1960. Compared with this, the kind of problems which we are confronting are equally daunting and serious. We turn out to be a country which have 1/3 of the population absolutely illiterate, poor, and mind you, even after 60 years of our independent India, we continue to fight on the number of poor people and poverty ratios. The latest report, which brings this percentage, it will be very alarming if you hear it. It turns out, I'm sure that most of you must have heard it. It is not 34%, it turns out to be 75%, which is acknowledged by the Government of India on Sources Commission. With this is only one part of the story. The agricultural sector, which accommodates roughly around 60% of the total population, contributes only to the extent of 15% to the national income. Imagine a situation, a population segment which is so predominant in one particular sector is finding its dwindling share all the way, and its productivity is very low. Its informal sector is predominant to the extent of 90% of the total population finds employment in this sector. These are not the issues which are very minor. These are the issues which will keep us engaged for a number of years to come if we do not come out of it. The employment scenario is very, very demoralizing. Very, very demoralizing. This is the reason that you find a number of young people, the young students involved in petty crimes. In fact, if you look at the history from the sociological angle, look at the history of crimes during the last 60 years or so, you find two very important changes. A, that it is the younger age group which have entered, unfortunately. It's essentially because the kind of education which you are giving and what we are giving, the quality of education. And B, which is equally important, that this particular group has entered into the white collar crimes over the period. It's essentially, if you look at the history of all the smaller state demands in India, which is a reflection of how poor we are in managing our social cohesion, social differentiation. Social differentiation in the cultural economics has been termed as a very important cultural asset which this country would have used given its 400 different tribes, given its 1,300 different castes, given in 4,000 different small dialects, given its 22 languages. So this kind of diversity would have been used as a cultural asset rather than using it for narrow political gains. Unfortunately, this has made the country sick in terms of political governance. If you look at the health front, India constitutes 17% of the global population. But can you think of a situation that the government of India acknowledges? It constitutes 23% of the child deaths, 68% of the leprosy cases, 30% of the TB cases, and 10% of the HIV. We would be the second largest country in the world with HIV/AIDS cases. The current life expectancy rates, etc., which are very high and we have achieved a lot, are still far less. The rate of growth is far less as compared to the small countries in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. The linguistic cultural pressures based on social hierarchies are getting further intensified with globalization-induced pressures. One very important aspect of globalization which we need to understand that globalization requires the country to have a macroeconomic policy changes to give more and more space to the private economy and give the space to the market. In this process, government loses its control. Government loses its control as a regulatory body, as a direct producer, as a managed goods producer, and also as a helper, as a building up of a system, because we are becoming a part of the nation state. This is a very, very important aspect. But at the same time, this globalization requires us to bring the institutional changes at all the decision-making levels, which will ultimately bring a change in the mindset. What is that mindset? Which is very important. The mindset which forces you to think in terms of creating more and more space for the market economy, and also to give more space to the private hands. In this process, the weaker is going to be further weakened, and the rich is going to. That is the reason that interstate and interpersonal income inequalities now, after the adoption of globalization policies, it is proven, demonstrated by the fact that the income inequalities have sharpened over the period. Now, these are the kind of, there is quite a bit, in fact, some of the few articles which are available on the net, particularly in the SSRN, something where I have talked about how the political system or the political economy system has gone wrong in not helping this country. I don't want to get into the right situation, but let me come back to the Indian diaspora. The term originally, the ancient Greek, means the ancient, how they define is scattering or sowing of seeds. It has gone a massive change over the period. Now we talk in terms of the people who are migrated from their own geographic boundaries and contributing to it. Today their contribution is very important, comprising about 30 million people of Indian origin, spread across 110 countries, and being the second largest in the world to help India to go global. This is, and the contribution in terms of lobbying, the contribution in terms of holding the equity stakes, which is relatively better and stable, are very, very important. But it is very well acknowledged that their role in tourism, transportation, telecommunication, trade, and transmission of monetary remittances. In fact, all along, Dr. Bhatt will join me that all along the emphasis has been remittances, and it has been divorced from using the Indian diaspora as a social capital asset for the further development of this country. Diasporas, they have been making contribution all along for long, but there are major limitations. The limitations are that the migration phenomena, the migration policies need to be integrated into the overall development policies if we are thinking in terms of keeping them as an important capital asset with us. The interests of the both host as well as the home country have to be well integrated with the Indian diaspora. India has initiated a number of schemes such as No India program, particularly for the young, and also the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. But it is also an acknowledged complaint by these people that we have not been able to make use of the global media and revolutionary changes in it creatively and to keep them interconnected. The role of the government is very, very important. There are 6 or 7 different important roles which have to be identified very, very clearly. Number one is that what Dr. Babli has talked about, defining diaspora in the perspective of rising human mobility and its role in international development. The data is very, very scarce. We don't get data at all. Third, the identification of groups that can contribute potentially and greatly to the development of the country. And fourth, to evolve an institutional framework, keeping in mind, in fact, there is a trust deficit which these people suffer. Keeping in mind the trust, perception, and images for integrating the diaspora. Fifth, institutionalizing the incentive structure. You see, if they are coming to put money in the country, they must have that kind of ownership, at least of initiators. But what is something which is super most important is the political will, vision, and honesty to find out ways and taking measures to maximize the contribution of Indian diaspora. The common link is the government to find out an enabling role, an inclusive role, building partnerships. Governments at all levels have to be made more and more important because there is an ethnic, there is a regional, there is a class, there is a caste aspect also in the Indian diaspora. What the future outlook? Diaspora should be viewed not only as a money sending process or remittances. It is to be acknowledged as a financial, political, intellectual, cultural, and social capital. This engagement requires a dynamic and complex process because integrating diaspora is itself a very complex process given its identity and cultural heritage. It should not be driven only by the objective of philanthropy, but also be governed by expectations, attachments, and preconceptions, as well as economically determined policies. The responsibility to produce attractive environments lies with the government, and government has to play a very, very important role. But it's also very important. The diaspora contribution is a function of personal strategies towards home country as well as the host country, and also the legal, political, social and economic status of the individuals in the host countries, home country's own development strategies, and how the home country treats their own diasporas. Building real partnership is the issue at the policy level making. Having said so, last word, Mr. Chairman, it would not be mistaken to perceive as a solution to all our problems. If we have the problems, solution lies within us, we have to find it out, but Indian diaspora can be integrated at the policy level to further facilitate, to get into our own problems which are daunting and serious. Thank you so much.